So welcome to this special edition of the SBC podcast, which is devoted to what I have termed the 10-bet Trey Mullinax saga, an attempt to unravel what took place last week with 10bet's failed attempt to move the goalpost on the price of a winning bet 48 hours after it actually won. Now, we were heavily involved here at SBC because we advised Mullinax via our weekly golf value service, which is run with the guys at bookiebashing.net and their own golf tracker, which also puts up Mullinax. Hence, I am delighted to be joined by the co-owner of Bookie Bashing, Tom Brownlee, to discuss this all. Tom, it's great to have you on. You've had a busy few days from the likes of, from what I can understand, organising a huge party. You've got a betting people interview that's gone on from Spar Sports, all whilst helping take on a big bookmaker. What a week for you, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I can't just get over the fact that it's 110 degrees in my house just now, Pete. That's the only thing that I'm concerned about. It's difficult to get past that. I am sweating buckets right now during this interview. It has been a busy week. A lot has happened, and you've been involved with it as well. And it's fair to say that it has been somewhat of a roller coaster. Is that right?
I think it has, definitely has been. And to conjure up the spirit of Alan Partridge, it's hot outside and it's going to be hot topics on this podcast today.
There we go.
Sliders and Partridge. But Tom, let's talk about what, for those people who are not familiar with what took place last week, do you want to give a bit of an outline to what took place and a bit of the timeline of it?
Well, here's how weekly golf value works. Okay, so we have, going back years and years, a golf model or a golf tracker that throws up plus EV bets in PGA and DP World golf tournaments. And a long time ago, I started sending them to you, Pete, as really a way of proofing them. I wanted someone else to independently say, these are profitable bets in the long run. Don't just take my word for it. I want someone independent to look at it. And as a result, we actually took this short list of selections that we used to proof the tracker, and we started to package them up as weekly golf value tips for people that just want to 6 to 8 golfers for every tournament to go and bet on and have a longer term profitable portfolio. It's very much a deconstructed and narrow window into bookie bashing for those that generally don't have a lot of time or a lot of desire for a wider range of betting opportunities. So every week we send 6 to 8 players, and a few rules that I have in place. We try our best, not to send out arbitrage opportunities. That can be a little bit difficult in the world of golf when it's very low liquidity and prices can change very quickly, but we do our best with that. And we have a rule of thumb that we will only give out golfers that are a good bet at 2 or more. In fact, we aim for 3 or more bookmakers outside of the same family. So, Paddy Power and Betfair Sportsbook, that's one family of bookmakers as far as we're concerned. Because, again, our objective here is we don't want to just cherry pick an outlier stale price. We want to give a selection of prices that are available at a number of books. So that's the background.
Tom, it's Wednesday afternoon as well. So,
yeah,
even with illiquid markets, the golf market has formed. So it's not whether we're cherry picking the best prices at Monday evening that gets smashed in.
Yeah, I mean, the markets generally go up at the bookmakers on a Monday morning unless it's a major. And any early price that's going to be smashed in has been smashed in by Tuesday or at the very latest Wednesday morning. And we're going up at Wednesday lunchtime. So you could, if you wanted to, with pretty much no skill, go onto Oddschecker on a Monday morning, find an outlier price that's twice as much as any other bookmaker, go and bet on him. You could probably expect that account to be shut down after your bet, but you will have had a plus EV bet. I mean, it's up to you whether you think there's longevity in taking that guy at 500 to 1 when everyone else is 200 to 1 with. So we do this for every golf tournament, and this particular week it was the Scottish Open and the Barbasol Championship 2022. So I've got 16 golfers with whom I'm providing prices at 3 different families of bookmakers. So I've got 48 permutations of bookmaker prices to send out to people. And in order to ensure that we're not sending out any prices that are cut, we have various bots that go left, right, and center, and we have some sensitivity checks, and we have some estimations of neutral EV because we are trying to play a fair game here. Again, I don't want to be sending out single outlier prices. I don't want to be sending out mistakes. I understand mistakes happen. I understand that I've seen them before. I've seen a price that's 100 to 1 where the bookmaker meant 10 to 1. And with that, I have sympathy. I almost think if you're going out and betting 100 to 1 when you know it was meant to be 10 to 1, there's not much difference to that of seeing someone drop their wallet in the street, picking the wallet up, taking the cash out and handing the wallet back. I mean, there has to be a little bit of honor on both sides of the game, not just from the bookmaker, but from the punter as well. And from what we could see, Trey Mullinax was a very reasonable plus EV bet at 10bet, Bet365, Sport Nation, Betway, and a number of different places. Now, we have the complexity in golf that you have different terms and different conditions at different bookmakers. You have Betway, 7 places, 1 to 5. You have Boyle Sports, 8 places, 1 to 5. You have Trey Mullinax, 5 places, 1 to 4. And the 1 to 4 is quite a bonus, right? 5 places, 1 to 4 is generally better value than 6 places, 1 to 5. It's comparable with 7 places, 1 to 5. And so the same odds at one bookmaker is very difficult to compare directly to another bookmaker if they are different terms. You have to bring in some big algorithms. We had our 8 golfers up. We had Tyler Duncan, Kelly Craft, Michael Giglick, Grayson Sigg, Dylan Vu, Lucas Nemec, Austin Smotherman, and our number 1 bet at 1 p.m. last Wednesday was Trey Mullinax, who was plus EV at a variety of bookmakers. And the 3 that we provided were Betway at 125 to 1, Sport Nation Bet365 at 150 to 1, and 10bet at 175 to 1. So that's what we sent out last Wednesday.
Yeah. And anyone taking a bet, I think it was about 110 to 1 or maybe 120 was the neutral EV on that point. And there was, at least 10 firms, it seems, over that.
Exactly 131.4 in our algorithm at 5 places, 1 to 4. So 131.4. There's only 2 intervals above that bookmakers generally price to. You'll get 150 to 1 and then you'll jump to 175 to 1. There's no real gap between 131.4 and there. And 2 intervals above the neutral odds is something that we see all of the time. It's a very common way of betting on golf. It's not something unusual. It's not something we would consider to be a mistake. And so nothing jumped out at me at the point of preparing this list of player bookmaker prices to bet on. We had a wide range of bookmakers. We generally have William Hill, Corbett, Sky Bet, Paddy Power, Boyle Sports, all different bookmakers in here. So if anyone's restricted at one, they can go and bet at another. 10bet does appear, but not very frequently. 10bet appeared on the list as the second plus EV bookmaker for Grayson Sigg. And it was the number 1 bookmaker for Trey Mullinax at 175 to 1. So we weren't full of 10bet. We advised them twice. One of them is the number 1 bookmaker to book at out of 16 players. And one of them is the number 2 bookmaker to bet on. Yeah.
And so therefore people place that bet readily. And I believe these odds with 10bet are available. I mean, I've seen them at 6 p.m. I've got a pull of all the Oddschecker odds at 6 p.m. There was still 175 to 1. And I've seen a bet slip from somebody that placed it at 9 a.m. the Thursday morning, 175 to 1 with 10bet. So they held those odds for whatever reason, and we'll get into that, for a long period of time before the tournament actually began. Fast forward, obviously, to the actual tournament in question. It's the Barbasol. It was overshadowed by the Scottish Open, wasn't it? That was taking place a week ahead of the British Open. So all the big names were in Scotland preparing for that. John Rahms and Chalfalays and Rory's are all playing in Scotland. So the PGA, this tour event was like a second tier. I think the leader, the favourite is it Chris Gotterup, who basically starting his second PGA Tour event from what I can tell. And he was like 20 to 1. So it's one of those tournaments whereby the market is a little bit more telling, perhaps, than other events, because it's perhaps a bit more open in terms of who might win, because none of the big names are there.
Which provides opportunity for us value bettors, of course. We love things like this because the less efficient the market, the more opportunity there is to find somebody like Trey Mullinax. And let me tell you something with Trey Mullinax before we just come to the sort of end of the tournament. Trey Mullinax came through the Corn Ferry Tour, the qualifying tour for the PGA, a tour in which if you win 3 tournaments in a year, you get into the PGA, or if you finish the season with an amount of ranking points. And you can drill down and get the statistics for Trey Mullinax from the Corn Ferry. In fact, I have done that. And I've got his greens in regulation. I've got his frequency of birdies. I've got his scrambling percentages, his driving distance. When you plot Trey Mullinax on a graph against the PGA players objectively against the same statistics as them, he stands out week after week after week. He performs statistically as well as the favourites. And yet, because he's a new guy, because he never really had any sort of winning prowess behind him, because perhaps he was always doing well in round one, but he would his nerve would get to him in round two. He's always priced up at 100 to 1, 200 to 1. And every week I put my graph together, I saw him and I was like, this guy is going to win one week. And he was always a value bet as far as we were concerned in the metrics graph that we do in the modelling in the background. I'm not surprised he was in contention in the Barbasol. He certainly for a long time has shown the potential to win an event.
Well, I mean, that's some fairly basic, not basic, but it's some simple things that any golf trader should be able to do and oversee the market and pull out all the stats on a player that potentially we see Cameron Young just came second in the Open.
Yeah. And
here's a guy who came similarly from the Corn Ferry. I think he came second at 300 to 1 earlier on in his PGA Tour life, if you like. And then, he's not been that price since. But one of those players who came perhaps without the name and don't think he's actually won yet, but obviously he's one of the best players now, is well known. And
sure, he's going to, and he's always seems to be a little bit overpriced again. And I think there's an important distinction here that if we were in the real world of bookmaking, if you were coming to me and I was offering you odds, I would never have offered you 175 to 1 on Trey Mullinax. My neutral odds made him 131.4. I actually may have struggled to give you more than 66 to 1 on. But I'm quite a recreational modeler, if that makes sense. I do not have access to the amount of statistics and the amount of full-time modeling techniques that odds compilers do. And so 10bet, with the resources behind them, should somehow have been aware that the 175 to 1 that they were offering on Trey Mullinax, it was a big price. It wasn't an unfair price. It was a big price. They could have done something about that had they invested into any part of their odds compiling part of their business. I mean, come on, this is there's 2 events on in the entire sport of golf that they're offering odds on. 2. If someone like me can identify someone on a graph like Trey Mullinax, it shouldn't be difficult for a company like 10bet, Boyle Sports, or anyone like that, with the resources that they have behind them, to also identify this if they invest any money into their odds compiling departments. Unfortunately, they don't. They outsource it. So.
Well, they do, but then 10bet won't stand out. Bet365 at 6 p.m. on the Wednesday were 150 to 1, the same terms.
Yes.
And there were other firms that are 125 to 1. There were more earlier, so I believe Virgin Bet were 200 to 1. I think Sport Nation were 175 to 1. I've seen NetBet 175 to 1. And I believe quite a few of those firms, like 10bet, Sport Nation, are all part, and LiveScore Bet, are all part of SB Tech, who provide the odds to those firms. And LiveScore Bet, well, actually, one of those firms are 200 to 1 at 6 p.m. on the Wednesday. So, 10bet weren't the best. And this is Oddschecker Matrix. You can get LiveScore Bet. We'll talk about perhaps Oddschecker later on and how they have all these different kind of lesser known firms on and should we trust them. But it was an outlier, and perhaps because the Betfair market didn't have liquidity. So I've got all the stats on pre-event Betfair. There was only £2,700 matched on Trey Mullinax pre-off. The highest price was 180. The average odds were 122. And he did go from 180 to 160 to around 100 before, and it closed at 85. So he was traded in somewhat, but the amount of money wasn't huge. And the Betfair market wasn't the guide that bookmakers have come to rely upon on this one. But I think it's important to state this is a value bet. But, even if you're taking 100 to 1 about 175 to 1 shot, it's still only a 1% chance versus a 0.6% chance. This is no nailed on golf bet. He's 1 in 100.
Yeah.
And he didn't trade, in running, he didn't trade short. He wasn't the favourite until right at the very end. He won it with a birdie at the 18th on the 4th day. And even at 6 o'clock on the Sunday, he was 4 to 1 on Betfair. Not the favourite. So he never traded odds on until right at the end. And he was in the top 10 perhaps for the whole portion of it. But this was no guarantee at any point in time until right at the very end when he birdied the last 2 to avoid a playoff.
So I also missed all of the Barbasol because late night on a Sunday. You told me at the beginning of this, I didn't know he was 16-1 going off on the Sunday. So 16-1, I've written him off. I'm not expecting to collect a winner from this. Always nice to wake up on a Monday morning and scroll up the PGA app from the bottom until you get to the top 10. And then you start going one by one and you're hoping your guy is at the top. And yeah, he won it, Trey Mullinax, last hole. And everybody seemingly gets paid out without issue at 175-1. On the Monday, there were no problems.
No.
On the Tuesday, sometime around about lunchtime, I started hearing from multiple sources that people are logging into 10-bet accounts and for every pound at 175-1 each way. I wish I hadn't got myself into this first, but £1.50, somewhere in the region of £220 should be in there. And, if you've got a fiver each way, £1,100. They've logged on to 10-bet and their balances are zero. There's nothing in there. And this is something I've come across before. And it is so hugely disappointing that can even be something that happens. Because imagine logging on to your bank balance and seeing that your bank balance was zero. Even if the bank had made an error, I don't think that should be something that is allowed to happen, because that can cause stress, mental anguish. At the very minimum, there should be a little note that pops up and saying, hey, we've got to talk to you. We're so sorry, something's happened. Let's have a chat. Can we phone you? Can you come on to live chat? But no, you log on and the balance is just zero. Hundreds, thousands, in the case of some people, tens of thousands of pounds just removed without explanation. That, for one, is an awful way to treat a customer, because you're left in a situation.
Absolutely.
What is going on?
People were logging in, Tom, and it's not like they'd resettled the bet 100-1. There was nothing appearing in their account, was there?
No, nothing.
They had to get onto live support and say, where's my winning bet gone? Where's my balance? Why's my balance not now zero? What's happened? And only at that point, they get told they were getting resettled at 100-1.
Yeah, as some sort of gesture of goodwill. Thanks for getting in touch. And no, you're not going to be having your payout at 175-1. And this is 48 hours after the event had finished. So the event finished on around about midnight on Sunday night. And now we're at lunchtime on Tuesday morning. So 36 hours after the event had finished. I've been in this situation a number of times. Your heart sinks and it doesn't get any... I mean, I wasn't on at 10, but I want to be clear here. So I can't share the exact emotion, but I know exactly what it feels like. I have gone into a shop with a winning bet, put it down on the counter, and then they turn around and they either say, we're not paying out on this, we're voiding this, or you're getting a lower payout, and you know you've done nothing wrong, and you sigh and you went, right, this is going to take a long time to sort out. And historically, I've been very angry every time this has happened, because the first thing that jumps out at me is I generally bet to a liability that I'm going to fight for. So my liability personally is over £1,000 into 4 figures. It can be as high as 5 figures. And if you're not going to pay me out on that, I'm going to fight for it and take you generally to the small claims court. And I have done this 10 times and I've won 9 and lost 1, and one that I lost is debatable because other people won the exact same case. I sigh because I'm like, I know I'm going to get this money. And this seems farcical that it's going to waste everybody's time here. And I have to go through this process of, I now have to mentally eliminate it and pretend that I'm never going to see it, because I can't rely on it, because it's not 100% going to be paid to me anymore. None of that should be necessary. That's the side of the bookmaker-customer relationship and the way that the bookmaker is interacting with people. You can't just take 1,500 quid, 1,000, or it's relative. I mean, there are guys who are £150 is a lot of money to them. In fact, I'll tell you this. The people that got in touch with me, we invited people who had been through this process to get in touch with us, because it was absolutely outrageous that they were offering to pay out at 100-1 instead of 175-1. There was no way that this could have been acceptable. Yeah. And so you and me both took the decision that we were going to release a joint statement and keep this in the public eye day after day after day. If necessary, I was going to highlight it every day for 6 months if I needed to, so that it didn't go away, because often I feel like the tactic of the bookmaker is to brush this under the carpet until it's forgotten about, and I didn't want that to happen. Yeah. And so 28 people got in touch with us. And one thing that was noticeable, actually, was that the guys who were betting the higher amounts, of course, were angry and disappointed, but they were calm and measured. I actually saw a lot of anguish in the people who were betting the lower amounts, the £1 each way, the £1.50 each way. And I really feel sorry for them. How unforgivable it is to these people who perhaps 250 quid, 300 quid is a huge win for these guys, because we had recommended maximum stakes based on the perceived EV we saw in Trey Mullinax. So compared to the favourites in the field, we're betting to win 3 or 4 times more than them. So these guys who were betting the smaller amounts, you could see the anguish that they were going through. And that's unforgivable, because this isn't the field of money management and the relationship people will have with their money. You cannot be perceived as stealing from people. And that's what it felt like to me from 10bet at this point. This felt like it was theft. It wasn't right and it wasn't fair.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head about, we advised at £5 each way. And I think maybe 70 to 75% of those who were in touch were on at, say, 10 each way or less. There's like a good proportion in doing 250 each way. And at £10 each way, it's a huge difference. It's just under £1,000 in terms of the return profit that you would make.
£10 each way is 2.2k.
Yeah. And then if it's 100 to 1, I think it's 12.50. It's 900.
And what a massive amount of money to take out of somebody's bank, and then to give them the £1,000 as if that's some sort of gesture of goodwill, like they're the good guys. Like, thank you so very much for stealing £1,000 from me.
Yeah, and it's important to make clear, and we said this in the statement, we're not the business of taking advantage of bookmaker palpable errors. You know, if for example, 10bet were 200 to 1 and everyone else is 20, well, you banged to rights there. And if you get caught, which you will do, and you have your account closed, well, it's your own fault. You're trying to take advantage of the situation. We're not in the business of telling people to multi-account. We're not in the business of telling people how to bonus hunt and, take advantage of all these different offers that some people do. And that's fair enough. That's not our business, is it, Tom? We don't.
No.
We're advocating people to bet sensibly and follow a sensible strategy plus EV bets. And this is like £5 each way in relation to £1,000 bank.
Yeah.
So people are putting 100, maybe £150 across both tournaments each week. Not huge sums of money, but within the realms of hobbyist, people that might term themselves semi-ish, semi-professional, or people just making a little bit of extra cash. And that's who they're taking the money from. If they were taking the money from you and I, we'd take them to small claims court. We'd hammer them. But that's our business, that's our interest, because we're doing so at the stakes that matter to us, and we know the system.
No bookmaker should be taking money from you or me, Pete, because they have a responsibility to their shareholders and their stakeholders, and we are on the professional ebb of this. The people that we're advising these bets to, it's nothing more than, if you like, following a model, following a tracker. A lot of these people will be recreational punters, low stakes recreational punters. That's who's caught up in this. And we expect our guys to play fairly and by the rules, and not to chase after mistakes, and not. In fact, we even promote, don't even partake in arbitrage. Don't touch those things, because it's not good for the overall ecology of the betting environment. So we advocate against that arbitrage. We're with the bookmaker on that side of the things, and we expect punters to play fairly. And even from the bookmaker side of things, do you know what? If 10bet had turned around and said we'll pay out at 150 to 1, I think I would have been mad. But I think I wouldn't have chased it up. I would have said to people, that really sucks. That's a lot of money that's been taken from you, but just take it. Because they're just trying to shift a little bit of liability. There's obviously been something that's gone wrong on their side. It's not right, but we're getting 85% of our payout here at 150 to 1. So it's probably just
versus the effort.
Yeah, versus the effort, which is typically waiting weeks and months. It's like somebody tells, do you have that friend that gets a parking ticket, and instead of just paying it, they'll fight it for months and months and end up getting divorced because the wife goes to a party and it's all they talk about. And it's like, mate, I know you're annoyed about the parking ticket, but for £100 it goes away. And then it's gone. And sometimes in life, the best solution is just to burn it, but not 100 to 1. That was too much. It was unacceptable.
It was what they did, but also their approach. By the fact they didn't, people had to get in touch with live support. They weren't clear and transparent about it. It was like, we're going to brush this under the carpet. We know we can't do this, but we're going to try it anyway. And well, lo and behold, we obviously did a bit of a campaign. Got a lot of traction. I don't know what your social media stats were, but certainly this was the most popular series of tweets that I've put out in terms of impressions and retweets and engagement. Emails received, a few calls received. Everybody, without question, was appalled by this. Often you get bookmaker acolytes and employees telling you, or, just arbors or whatever. But no, even they were on board. the disdain for 10bet and how they have approached this. And then fast forward to Thursday, and you get a call or an approach to speak to...
Well, this was a surprise.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Because what do you know about 10bet? I could tell you about Bet365 is Denise. I know where the offices are, actually up near Etruria and Stoke-on-Trent. Sky Bet, I've seen videos of their offices. Betfred, I get the whole thing with Fred Dunn and everything like that. Even Boyle Sports, the Irish bookmaker, Paddy Power, I understand sort of physically where the offices are, who the people are that are behind this. What did you know about 10bet before this instance?
Yeah, I didn't know very much at all.
Me neither.
I'd heard of them. Like I say, neither of us took this bet with 10bet. We both have the same approach. We're unable to bet each way with bookmakers on golf, so we bet win only on the exchanges. So it wasn't my skin in the game on this particular one, and never was you. So I don't know anything about 10bet.
And this causes a little bit of anxiety because now we're up against a faceless website. I couldn't even tell you what country they're in. In fact, Duncan tried to find something about the company accounts through he's a chartered accountant and he knows where to look for these things. He could see very little of them. In fact, he found a Google Street View of Malta and some of the streets that he shared with me. I'm like, they can't be based there. Those houses look too small and they're not an office block or anything like that. And so part of the concern is, how do you even talk to these guys? How do you start a conversation? Because they've obviously got their customer service representatives to fend people off and tell them, goodwill gesture, 100 to 1. So I do not know where to start. And everyone that I've raised at small claims court, they're either based in the UK or Gibraltar, because that's where William Hill and everyone is. And I've been to Gibraltar. I know William Hill. I've slightly it's the feeling of not knowing what we're going to do with 10bet. And so you and me were talking, it was like, we're going to have to come up with a plan. And our plan is either going to be, ideally, we would live in America, because what I want is a class action suit. We take all 28 people that have got in touch with me, and I combined the liability that had been taken from them, and it was £44,000. That's an average of £1,445 per person that had been in contact with us. How many more people had money taken from them than the 28 that had got in contact with us? I don't know, but a significant number more. It would be 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. I don't know. And again, this is the thing when I went into William Hill and wouldn't be paid in the shops. I'm going to chase this up. But what about the guy that put on £1.50? He's not going to chase it up. And when you pay out to me, you're not going to go and find him to pay out either. You've stolen his money. You've stolen his money to make your shareholders, your stakeholders richer. Your shareholders and stakeholders by nature are already wealthy enough to have a shareholding in William Hill. This guy betting £1.50 and you've unlawfully taken money away from him, he's never going to see that money again. He's not betting to a liability to chase it up. And there must be so many people that would have shrugged their shoulders and gone, well, they've paid me out at 100 to 1. I'll accept 100 to 1. So we were thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to advise this? We'd love a class action suit, because that would mean that everybody that wasn't involved with it would be paid out as well. But we couldn't do that. We don't live in America, and that's not a legal thing that is available to us in the UK. So the two options that we have are either an independent arbitrator, IBAS, or the Gambling Commission, or less than zero use, and we'll come to them, or the route that I always go down, the small claims court. And so this is where we were after 2 days of hearing nothing, but trying to get some sort of traction, trying to get some sort of engagement on social media. And like you, I was starting to get a little bit of engagement. I post an equity graph showing that Trey Mullinax is a value bet. I get 2 likes on it, and I think one of those is from my mother. And I then post that there's a naughty bookmaker stealing some money from people, and I get 100 people engaging with it because people love a villain story. And we were at the point where we were like, right, we're now going to have to come up with a targeted plan of action that we're going to have to advise people. And it's going to be annoying if people are going to have to do this 28 individual times by themselves. But if they have to, we will do that. I was thinking of actually going down the route of meeting with a lawyer to see if there was some way, like the Football Index guys, they've all sort of, they're doing their own cases, but they're all sort of getting the same structured information from the same one lawyer that's dealing with it. Well, I was starting to think, do I know any lawyers that want to take this on and everything like that? And I was having a lunchtime snooze because I'd eaten some bad buffalo chicken the night before. That's a different story. And I woke up after my lunchtime snooze and I had an email from Roy from 10bet. And he just wanted to have a chat with me. And that was certainly unexpected. And, well, I was very happy to see it because it means that now this faceless company that are not engaging with anybody now are opening an avenue of dialogue.
Indeed, I was surprised when I heard about it as well. But to a certain extent, you never know how their social media team, for example, communicates with the actual trading team or the bookmaker themselves. Sometimes they're outsourced. But looking at their social media feed, they put out tweets and I scrolled through one and I saw countless replies saying, how dare you do this? Trey Mullinax, 175 to 1, 100 to 1. So it seems to have snowballed beyond just you and I. Our operations are very small in the betting world. Let's be frank. We are a small fry taking on a big bookmaker run by, which provides odds from a large odds providing company, an SB Tech. So didn't really know where it would go, but certainly to actually get the 10bet to actually come forward and want to talk to us. And then, do you want to tell us about what they said, actually?
I noticed that, and that's actually quite an important thing that you say there, because a lot of the people that were replying to them, so they last tweeted on July the 7th, and they tweeted a picture of some young people, 10bet's horse racing department, trying to figure out who approved the £12 Trixie, which won Farmid from Southampton, £31,374. Interestingly, by the way, I did look up if we had a Farmid at Bookie Bashing, but that's by the by. And underneath this, you get somebody that says, surprised you didn't just change the prices after you won like you did with Mullinax, crooks. Then somebody else says, your company took bets off Mullinax at 175, you better honor these. Somebody else says, we'll never use you, you welch on bets. Somebody else says, scammers, pay out on the prices that people took. Somebody else says, scammers. And you suddenly start to think, most of these people you would imagine that are saying this, they weren't on Mullinax. They've just heard about it and they're infuriated. And imagine if you're the 10bet media team. Well, the last time they tweeted out was now the 7th of July, which is 12 days ago, because they're not going to tweet again whilst people are just going to be replying like this to them. It looks terrible on them, doesn't it?
Yeah. They were hiding replies as well because there were so many negative ones. So yeah, they obviously 10bet were very aware of what's happening and their reputation's taken a trashing in the media. And perhaps they wonder, part of me wonders, would they have settled without our campaign, or would they, because they might have thought, well, we're going to go, all these cases are going to go to IBAS and they're going to lose anyway, and we're going to have all this trash on social media, reputation's taking hits, we may as well cut our losses now, because that's what they did. He spoke to you and he said they're going to resettle, 48 hours going to resettle back at the original 175 to 1. Tell the listeners, though, about what he said and perhaps whatever justification and reasons they had for the original change.
So I'm going to have to fact check this after the event, because bear in mind, one, it was 1 week ago, and two, I'd just woken up. And this, so it's a little bit hazy in my memory, but I did press the record button, so I will be able to go back and check what I said. The owner is based over in, well, he was in Israel, whether he lives in Israel or not. So that's the first thing. We can I've got a location in the world. I did bring up with him the fact that I have no idea who you are and where you are. And he was like, they wanted to be like that. So they wanted to be an anonymous with just the front of 10bet targeting the British customers. There was a sob story. There was an element of they're not a bookmaker that is as big as Bet365, as Sky Bet, as Paddy Power. There was an element of the 175 to 1 was a mistake. They were absolutely sticking to the fact that it was a mistake. They were saying that other bookmakers at the time were 90 to 1. Now, the word at the time is interestingly, I can only say that I advised the bet at 1 p.m. on Wednesday, and I know what the prices were at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. I didn't follow them from 1 p.m. on Wednesday to lunchtime on Thursday when it kicked off in the Barbasol. Perhaps Bet365 was 90 to 1 then, but I mean, I couldn't have projected what was going to happen in the future. And if they didn't cut their odds on time and some more people came in, I would still say that is nobody's fault but their own. How, by the way, how a company like 10bet don't simply have a max liability limit on someone, I don't know. It's like, let's say Pete and Tom's bookmaking service. Let's say we've got £500,000 in the bank that we can cover golf bets with. Why don't we, once Trey Mullinax is at £500,000 liability, surely the max stake on him has to be 0 for everyone else, simply because we don't have the money to pay out to them. That seems like quite an easy thing to be in some sort of betting system. You know, I understand that bookmakers don't have infinite pockets.
Well, I was going to say, Tom, it wasn't 90 to 1 with Bet365. It was 6 p.m. It was 150 to 1. So that's, you're not right. But we talked about SB Tech. So SB Tech are an odds provider. They provide basically the firms like 10bet who don't build their own odds or whatever. They provide their odds solution for them. And they were the same odds for all these other firms. But yet they were different, it seems, on Wednesday afternoon when it came to the price of Trey Mullinax. They perhaps had a different approach, like say maybe a liability question whereby they pushed or reduced their odds. But equally, if we had Pete and Tom bookmakers, Pat bookmakers, and we were operating, we wouldn't be operating like, let's pull up the Oddschecker for today. We've got 3M open. We're recording this Tuesday the 19th. 3M open. And I look to those golfers between, let's say 100 to, I think it's 250 to 1. 10bet, Sport Nation and Live Score Bet, all part of the same SB Tech firm, are all joint best priced on, I would say, 30 to 40 golfers between 100 and 200 to 1-ish.
So they're making the same
mistake. It's a strategy, yeah. Lee Hodges, they're 150. Bet365 is 125, the same terms. Everyone else is 90, 100 to 1. So at some point, this kind of strategy is going to catch you out.
You can't get 250 to 1 at Ben Martin anywhere, except at 10bet where you can get 400. You know, so the week after, now again,
come on, Ben Martin.
I hope if they've got £500,000 liability that they can pay out on this market, once they've reached £1,250 in back bets from people taking Ben Martin, they've got two options. I mean, what they should be doing is it should be progressively slashing the odds until he's 1.01. But if you're not doing that, you shut the door and you don't accept another bet on Ben Martin. And someone goes on and tries a bet on him and then they have a big moan. They won't take a bet on Ben Martin. Well, 10bet said, well, we don't have any money left and we can't pay you out if they did do that. And that's a reasonable argument to me. So
exactly.
So Roy was playing the times are tough. 10bet aren't a big company. People were taking a price that we got from somewhere else and that wasn't right. And I put it to him that, well, one, we do our best to avoid anything like arbitrage, to avoid anything like outlier prices. And I gave him the prices that I thought that were correct at the same time. And I put it to him that we weren't going to let this go. This was something that we were going to be advising court action, but he did say that wasn't going to be necessary and that they had already made the decision. Again, they were using the words a gesture of goodwill, but they had already made the decision that everybody that was on at 175 to 1 was going to be paid out at 175 to 1, even if they were from a category of punter that wasn't going to be long-term profitable. And he told me this. He said they have a ticker of profit loss that they address twice a day. And they woke up and they saw this ticker on Monday morning and that it was an amount that they were going to lose that was quite frankly unacceptable. Now, I don't know how much they had on Mullinax at 175 to 1, but if it was £25,000, then that's going to be the best part of 2 million. I think my maths are off there slightly. If it was £5,000, that's going to be the better part of £1 million liability. And maybe they were going to be stung for £1 million liability. I sort of don't care because how much money have they made in all of the golf tournaments leading up to this? If there's been 50 tournaments in the last year and they've made 20 grand on each tournament and now they've lost $1 million, I don't care that they've lost $1 million. That's not my problem. But they said that the issue was that they had found that a lot of accounts were signing up just to bet on Trey Mullinax, and that those accounts were never going to be profitable accounts. They were literally signing up to take a big value bet. One of the things people had told us is that they had found that their limits were 1 pence or 0 pence on all bets now at 10bet. Now, I very much want to, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to, but I very much want to differentiate the problem that we have here between restrictions and unfair payouts. You see, restrictions are an inevitable part of the industry that I do not have a solution for. I don't think they're right or fair, and I think they've gone too far, but I don't actually have an alternative. And I actually have a little bit of sympathy for a company when people are signing up mums and uncles and dads and dogs just to have a single bet. And I want to sort of turn to people and say, I'm sorry that you're now restricted to a penny, but the important thing is that they're allowed to do that. So don't put too much mental energy into worrying about it. The problem we had here was they're not allowed to steal money from you. And that's the bit that we're more focused on. Regardless, I did say to Roy, look, pal, I know you've restricted everybody that was on Trey Mullinax to 1p or 0p so that they can't have another bet with you. And I understand that you've got the heebie-jeebies that everybody was a bad actor from the punter side of the fence. This won't be true. The people that follow weekly golf value may be following a bunch of other tipsters. I can't say if those tipsters are long-term profitable or not, but generally, I think a lot of people will be mixing in their own fun value bets with a little bit of tipster bets, and the general Venn diagram of their bets will be good for you in the long run. The occasional Trey Mullinax may sting, but how often has a Trey Mullinax happened in the last year? 175 to 1, maybe the second or third biggest winner we've had in the space of 4 years of tracking these prices. So it's not something that happens very frequently. So I told Roy he should look at that and reconsider what he's done there. But I understand there's 0% chance of him doing that. They've made a decision that they're going to restrict everybody and they're not going to reverse that. So that's the information he gave to me. But he thought it was unfair, and he thought that there were a lot of people that had signed up just to have this one bet.
That strikes me as an odd thing to say, because even if it was 100 to 1, the true value price, true neutral EV, that's still a 1% chance of victory. This is not a, this is not a traditional back to lay, is it? There's not the money in the market on Betfair's we've spoken about, where people queuing up to lay him to trade it back. I mean, it's not like he led by 10 shots the whole way. He was wire to wire winner, and he was clearly a completely overpriced golfer. He did perform better than. He was perhaps the 50th ranked golfer at 175 to 1, and then he was the 30th ranked golfer at 100 to 1, maybe, but he still was the 30th or 35th best golfer in terms of percentage chance based on the odds and based on the market traded. So
exactly. So it wasn't like he had no chance. Like it could have happened, and if they had a trading department, they would have spied this. What I find very, very interesting coming out of the back end of this conversation, I was very happy that everyone got their money back, and I had quite a good week because quite a lot of people said that I'm owed a beer. And for everyone that said I'm owed a beer, I will be taking you up on that at some point whenever I will travel 40 miles just to get the beer that you promised me. What's interesting, I find, is that we believe genuinely that 10bet were guilty of predatory and unacceptable behavior. And 10bet initially believed that all of their customers were guilty of predatory and unacceptable behavior, which is why we end up in this mess in the first place. Both parties are looking at the others and thinking that their behavior is unacceptable. The difference with 10bet is that they've grouped every single person into the same category. I can't guarantee that there weren't one or two people within their volume of bets that were perhaps behaving in a manner that we wouldn't recommend people did, because it's not good overall for any of us. But to treat everybody exactly the same, to restrict every single person and to take money from every single person, including the people who were getting on at 1 p.m. on Wednesday when we know the price was reasonable, it was a very poor decision-making from 10bet.
Can I ask you, the reasons they gave us that it was an obvious error. Now, as far as I'm aware, there's no such obvious error, get-out clause, it's palpable error, which we talked about. But there was no justification. Did he talk about that at all with you, what this obvious error was? Was it their system was down and they couldn't change the odds from 175 to 1?
Well, here's what I believe. Roy owns the company. He will have asked somebody for an explanation of how are we in this mess. The person who has given him the explanation of how we are in this mess, whoever that is, might be quite nervous that the length of their employment might be shorter than they believe it's going to be, because this would have been very costly. And there may have been an element of covering their own backs by telling Roy this is definitely a misprice, because that was what he believed. And I very much firmly told him it was not a misprice. How do you define, incidentally, a misprice? I mean, I'm going to ask you that question, Pete. Do you know of any formal definition of it?
I think beyond the palpable error, which would be, was it a transcription error where you put the decimal place in the wrong spot or add a 0 to the end of an odd? There wouldn't be anything. I believe in America, there's no such thing as palpable errors. If you make a mistake, you own it.
No, in Spain.
Bookmakers are probably quite relieved.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's like, it gets a little bit confusing if the palpable error can bring down the company.
Of course.
You know, if it was 1 billion to 1 instead of 10 to 1, and then everyone's going to lose their jobs and everything like that. So I don't think there is free range for any amount of liability to sort of legally have to be paid out. But I think we could seriously benefit from some formal rules around exactly what a palpable error is and what a palpable error isn't. I mean, even little things like there was a bet on that I was on in William Hill shops about there to be 2 converted tries in a particular rugby game. And the first one was a converted try, and the second one was a penalty try underneath the post. Now, penalty try isn't converted, it's an automatic conversion. If you look in the rules of various bookmakers like Bet365 and Boyle Sports and things like that, it says a penalty try is a converted try, but it doesn't say it in William Hill. And in fact, William Hill, instead of settling it as a loser, they pulped it. They said, you feel like this cannot be an acceptable way of managing the rules. There has to be, as far as I'm concerned, one set of rules. We can't have an instance where one bookmaker pays out on a shot on target and the other one pays out and they say it's not a shot on target. There needs to be a centralized way of managing the rules for all of the sports, because it's way too confusing for the punter. And within that centralization, that would also manage what is a palpable error and what is not a palpable error, because I think it would be too difficult to sort of structure this in legalese to say in these scenarios it is palpable and these it isn't palpable. But at least if one independent arbitration service was saying this is palpable and this isn't palpable, then we would have some guidance on that, which perhaps brings us to IBAS.
It does neatly. And we have spoken with IBAS. They're going to come on Richard Haler, the CEO, I think, the MD, is going to come on a future podcast. We're talking with him about when that might be, because we did talk with them about this. Ultimately, we didn't need their involvement, but this is part of the issue. There is, for example, like you talked about there with what is a palpable error, grievances that people have like this. The direction that we received from this as we were looking like on Wednesday to try and figure out a way forward was, well, each individual person has to open in a case with us. We have to see their bet slip. We have to check out each individual error. Now, there has to be an element of active management. Somebody, there's talk of a gambling ombudsman. I believe IBAS is touting for that role. Perhaps that's why they want to come on to podcasts like ours and be a little bit more communicative. Perhaps not. And then it has to be, I feel, like a better management of the system. And for instances like this, there has to be active management and deterrence to stop firms applying these kind of, like you talked, stealing money, making up the rules as they go along to suit them because it's a failure of trading from their perspective. They've taken too much liability on a golfer because it's like the guy who lays horses at 200 to 1 and then complains when one finally wins, the black swan or a mini black swan that takes place. So there needs to be active management. Somebody from IBAS needs to look at this, go, oh, we've got 10 people that have got in touch this morning, talk about the same issue. This doesn't look right. Let's have a look, pick up the phone, speak to 10 bets, say what's taken place, look at the thing and go, right, every single person that you've done this to, you have to reverse it and settle it 175 to 1.
And it's not just the people that have come to us. Every person you've taken this bet from, you have to contact and repay back. And I often wish that would have been the way with my William Hill court cases, where I just don't want the money back from me. I want them to find every person from their cameras, because they use their cameras all the time for shop customers. Go find the recreational customers, find out who placed those bets and give them the money that they're owed. And you're absolutely right. This active management, if 28 people have exactly the same problem, how inefficient is it that all 28 people have to fill in exactly the same form with exactly the same details? That's not right.
Yeah, it's the same case. For each individual person has the same case. There may be the occasional person you've said that's taken advantage, opened an account from the same household or the same name. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Those individual cases, understand. But stuff like this, it's just a waste of time. And that's one of the criticisms about IBAS, is the length of time it takes to get cases to resolve. And I mean, that's whether or not they resolve in your favor, because you say you can have the same case and you get different outcomes perhaps sometimes. But it could take months. Yeah. And what are interest rates at the moment? They're skyrocketing with inflation. That money, that £1 million, is sitting in 10 bets account, earning them, 5, 6, 7, 8% interest. I don't know what the interest rate is now on the high savings accounts, but significant sums of money. And meanwhile, they lose the case, they have to pay it out. 3 months later. But has everybody involved opening a case of IBAS? Probably not. There'll be so many people, and this is bookmaker tactics. There'll be so many people who can't be bothered.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's going to be so many people that
don't even realize, Tom. They don't even realize, or they don't know what to do. They're not following us. They're not part of our ecosystem, our world. They don't aware of the campaign. They just go, oh, well.
They don't. There's lots of people that don't want to fill out a form or go through formal processes like this. And why should they? Why should you waste so much time and mental energy for something that, in a case as clear as this, where the entire customer base has been unfairly penalized, there needs to be a position where one person highlights it and IBAS or the Gambling Commission turn around and go, everybody that was on this bet, hold fire. We are launching an investigation. And to that, I ask you the question, where the hell have the Gambling Commission been throughout this entire thing?
There's nothing at all. Not a peep. Not a peep.
I tagged them on every post that I did. I started asking them, where are you? There's no communication from them. There's no acknowledgement from them. They couldn't care less about this. And the issue I have with this is that they're the ones that are issuing the license. I'd like to hear something, even if they just said, this has nothing to do with this and they can keep their license. At least there's an acknowledgement that they're listening to the punter. There was nothing. I went onto their Twitter to even see if they're active there. And they do seem to be busy promoting how tolerant they are with the LGBTQ plus 2Q2A communities. And there's a quote from Deputy CEO Sarah Gardner speaking at the International Legislators' agenda today. There is a need for us to work together that is more important than ever due to growing internationalization of the industry. Share the lessons learned, best practice, and keep talking. All of that is so relevant to what we're talking about just now, and it's complete hot air.
Yeah.
It's complete hot air. They're not worthy of the jurisdiction powers that they've been given. They're really not.
Well, I hope that in the white paper, which has got canned again, just as well, because what they put forward was a shambles. I hope they get canned in the white paper. I hope the impression that we get is that they have zero interest. They're not engaging with anybody apart from the problem gambling side of things. And that absolutely needs tackling, but there is more than one issue at play here. And to just operate in a vacuum where nobody says anything from the Gambling Commission, nobody meets with punters' representatives, has any engagement, picks up the phone, writes an email. There's so easy to contact you and I, so easy to talk to people in the industry, get a sense of what's happening, because they need to be involved, obviously, to protect punters. But what's to deter 10bet or other companies from taking this approach in the future? This one, they were caught out, and it happened to a large swathe of people, and we were on top of it. This will be happening. This is not a 10bet issue. This is an industry-wide issue because they can get away with it because nobody's pulling them up on it.
Yeah, because we were sitting as sort of the proponents of Trey Mullinax as part of weekly golf value and bookie bashing. Had we not been us and they'd done this to a few small guys, then the only way that people would have been able to take this forward is IBAS, and I have no faith that IBAS actually would have even found in the punter's favour here. Yeah. So it's a case where we're lucky. And I don't want to be pessimistic, but I don't see anything changing. I mean, how difficult it is just to get this white paper out where they're actually trying to promote change towards protection of gambling harm, which you would feel like is the easier thing to tackle for the legislators, for the guys in charge, than it is to worry about the guys who are being welched on bets and having money stolen from. That's the easier thing for them to do, and they can't even get that right. So whilst we sit here and say we absolutely demand change, we will not tolerate a bookmaker just deciding to change the odds after an event has finished. We will not tolerate behavior such as 10bet. Unfortunately, we're not going to get much help from anybody in the near future that I can see anyway. The only thing that we can really do, you and I and anyone else, is keep it public and don't let this unfairness be swept under the carpet, because that's often what the bookmakers' tactics are.
Well, that's the joy of social media, isn't it? You can get stories like this out to a large group of people interested in a topic in a very short space of time. So sweeping issues under the carpet just doesn't float anymore, doesn't work. And it's important to say, like, we are open to talk to IBAS. We're going to get them on the podcast. We're going to talk to them. We're going to put all the questions that people have about them to them, the criticism, and we'll try and see what they say. And the same goes for the Gambling Commission or anybody that involved in decision making at this side or that side of the fence, from what are they going to do to protect punters? Why are they seemingly asleep at the wheel? They dropped the ball on Football Index. Is this symptomatic of an organisation that's just not fit for purpose? Seems to be that way. Or is there effective change coming? Are people trying hard behind the scenes? Do they care? Right now, the silence that we hear indicates that they don't actually care. And I want to segue onto the black market and what this means, because we hear a lot from the bookmaker's mouthpiece, the BGC, the Betting and Gaming Council, led by Michael Duga, and it's kind of spouted in the Racing Post, who listen to their narrative and push their agenda forward about the black market. The black market, affordability checks are going to drive the black market. What about bookmakers behaving like black market operators, changing the prices 48 hours after the event? That's something I would expect off a black market bookie. If I place Trey Mullinax, my WhatsApp bookmaker, at 175 to 1 Wednesday, on the Tuesday, 48 hours afterwards, he says, I'm not paying you at that, I'm playing you at 100 to 1. What are you going to do about it? Well, I've placed it with a black market bookie. I can't really go and complain to the authorities, can I? Because I'm banked to rights. Why should a punter listening to this, and many of the people following it, have any confidence in the licensed system if bookmakers are allowed to behave like this, effectively like a black market operator? It's going to push people to the black market. But the only narrative that the BGC and those people want to talk about is affordability. But there are many strands to why people will consider the black market, and this is certainly one of them.
The only way you're going to keep people away from the black market is telling them that they're protected. You are protected if you invest in these shares instead of these dodgy shares over here. You are protected if you bet at regulated bookmakers rather than black market bookmakers. And just now, what we're seeing is that regulated bookmakers are doing what they want to do. It's not, by the way, just now. This is happening 5 years ago. It was happening 10 years ago. Yeah. Has always been a culture through trading teams that we will act with impunity. And if it goes wrong, if it goes as far as IBAS in the courts, then if we're forced to pay out, at least we pushed them as far as we could push them. And at least we tried to hold on to as much money as possible. That degree of behavior leads to no protection to the consumer. And so why should the consumer believe that regulated bookmakers are any different or any preference over black market bookmakers? There's no reason to think it, is there?
Personally, not. And obviously, if you opened up a WhatsApp bookmaker account, you probably don't need to verify your ID, go through AML checks, KYC checks, all these different things that are barriers to people actually getting started to play. You just have to send the cash on, buy Bitcoin or whatever you do, and then off you go.
And I can actually get on.
Yeah.
I do believe that quite a lot of the white paper and a lot of people are not taking black market bookmakers that seriously because they don't get exposed to it. Well, let me tell you this. One issue that we have, Pete, telling people good value bets on golf is that we hear over and over again, I had a great run, I made some money, but I did bet on Trey Mullinax, and now I can't bet at that bookmaker and at this bookmaker. I mean, people are getting restricted just for placing a winning golf bet these days. We are going to end up now, our side of the spectrum, at the more sort of professional betting side of the spectrum, where there is way more advantages betting on the black market than there is trying to find a way of betting on the regulated market. And it's a no-brainer. I would even pose the question to you, why would we bet on the regulated market? Tell me one advantage of it. There's so many advantages to betting on the black market. And we get, especially over at Bookie Bashing, we get black market bookmakers coming to us all the time saying, if your guys cannot get a bet, let them know about us. Yeah. And up until now, we have refrained from doing this because we're in a bit of sketchy area, because we felt historically like we could protect people as long as they're betting at Sky Bet and 10Bet. But now, why should I think that anymore? The black market, as far as we're concerned, may be the only direction that we can go into.
Yeah. As people that aspire to make a profit from our betting, you pride yourself in finding solutions to problems. So if you can't get online, you start to look at other means, whether it be shops, whether it be through other people that are able to get online for you. And maybe it might become that the black market becomes a part of that strand. If you want to get on, you need to bet into the black market. That's the best way to get on. And we adapt and evolve and we move with the times, because prohibition doesn't work. We've seen that across so many industries. You start to have a unregulated or poorly regulated industry like bookmaking. People people will find other ways and means, or people lose confidence in the regulated industry, other ways and means to get their bets on and also if they're restricted, or maybe they are people from gambling harm perspectives unable to bet with bookmakers because of the barriers in place, but there's no protection in place for them, and they're going to go to the black market. So it's an issue that needs tackling from many different strands. But that's obviously the black market. But I also wanted to, before we go on too long, I want to talk about Oddschecker's role in this, because they are coming from some criticism and from a few people on this, and rightly so, because 10bet are in their odds matrix. And we've seen other firms that have been, like MoPlay, if you remember them, BetBull, BetBright. They were all, I think, Sunbets.
Yeah.
You pay enough money, you get on Oddschecker. And they are the number one odds resource.
I've never understood the business model of pay to get on Oddschecker and let everyone know that you are the best price and on what is probably not a profitable bet. Because whoever is top price on a bet, there'll be very, very little difference between that price and the fair odds generally. So no, I've never understood why bookmakers clamour and fight to get onto Oddschecker.
It only works if you filter your customers, like Paddy Power and Betfair. If you know within a few clicks of a button, a few bets, the lifetime value of each player. They are some of the very best. If you read about them, they are some of the very best at identifying a pattern or what they expect from any given customer, restricting and allowing you to stake up if you are a mug or if you
don't play singles. Okay, sorry,
don't play singles. Or like the Racing Post once said, if you're restricted with Betfair, don't worry because you can double your bet by placing the same stakes with Paddy Power.
Crikey!
So you can get, of course you can. Yeah, you get £5 each way on. That was legitimately an article I read recently, like last year, I think, in the Racing Post about restrictions.
Wow.
So let's not talk about the betting media too much, but certainly Oddschecker have a heavy role to play here, and the questions need to be asked. What due diligence do they perform on the firms that are offering odds in their matrix? If they are saying they're 175 to 1, but they're not, and they're saying it's an obvious error, like, at what point do Oddschecker have to improve their services and or vet the bookmakers that they have listed and take a sizable sum of money from? Because, as I said, like MoPlay, BetBull, BetBright, Sunbets, there's been a few others that I've probably forgotten, were on the odds matrix and people were placing bets with them and trusting them as a number resource. We've got a leadership election for the Conservative Party, the new Prime Minister, and all these newspaper outlets are all quoting odds from Oddschecker. It's the number one resource for odds and for percentage chances of victory. So certainly there needs to be some focus on Oddschecker.
Well, I mean, Oddschecker might argue that they are a free service. They don't charge anyone as a viewer to come and see those odds. And so because there is no intrinsic charge involved, do they have any responsibility for accuracy on the site? But they certainly do play in to this misnomer that somebody can go in and be a savvy customer and get the top price and have any longevity in betting. There is a juxtaposition there between those two arguments. Come and look at the top price and come and bet on it, and do that too many times and we're just going to stop you from doing that. So it's a whole weird thing for me, Oddschecker. It really is.
Yeah, well, just spoken about in the past. If something is for free, you are the customer in some way, and you are the customer because they're making, affiliation fees, no doubt. Yeah, looking at adverts, whatever it might be. So don't think just because it's a free resource, it's on your side necessarily. I think you have to be careful clicking direct links to bookmakers from Oddschecker as well, because it does tag you as somebody that's perhaps more price sensitive, as a guy wandering in off the street who just Googles Sky Bet or Betfred and places the bet, without any thought of what the actual odds actually are. I was going to say as well, we've gone into a lot today, and obviously we talked about 10bet, and I think it's important to say this is not a particular issue is related to 10bet, but there are several industry issues like this across different bookmakers, perhaps that don't get the same level of interest, perhaps just one individual bet for one customer at different firms. It happens across the industry. It's not just 10bet. Making decisions like this affect customers. I wanted to talk about how people can find help. Because, we talked about what we've done on this one, and we're not always going to be able to get behind every case and push it, and it's not all going to be as open and shut as this one. Justice for Punters, that's a fantastic resource. I know Brian Chappell's retired from doing active cases, and who can blame him? Because there's too many cases to take on an individual level. But if you are caught up in a dispute with a bookmaker, whether it be something like this, they're not paying out, they're changing the odds, or there's just some kind of issue, go on Justice for Punters, because that is the best resource. Brian's put all these guides together about what to do, the different resources, you talked about small claims court, you talked about IBAS. There are other options available to you, and how almost to go through it step by step in a chronological order. So if you have an issue like this now or in the future, go check out Justice for Punters. I'll put it in the show notes for this. I don't know if you've used them before, Tom, but I've had Brian on the show. He should be knighted for the services he's done for punters over the years.
Yeah, I had Brian on as well years ago, and it ended up being 3.5 hours because he has got a lot to talk about. And what always amazed me is that he did that as a voluntary service. And so there's almost proof in the pudding that the resources of one person had a massive effect on the betting landscape. And what confused me is that I don't know how much a betting license is in this country. To me, it feels like, again, there should be some sort of independent service like Justice for Customers that is funded for through the Gambling Commission licenses that are taken from betting companies. Because he was the number one aid for punters that were caught up in any sort of issue. And whilst he's retired from cases just now, if you ever email tom@bookiebashing.net, I might not be able to look at every single case for you, but certainly we will be able to point you in the direction of someone like Justice for Customers, or if necessary, IBAS, or if necessary, the Small Claims Court, if it deems going down that route, and various different sort of pages that would be available that can at least give you a step-by-step of what to do if this has happened in this scenario. But J4P were the leading proponents for justice for punters in the UK in the last decade, for sure.
Yeah, I think I don't know what his ongoing sum is, but I think it's in the millions, and he tallies it up. He says, Justice for Punters has helped, get £4 million off bookmakers that they otherwise would have kept. I think it's perhaps a lot more than that, but yeah, he's a wonderful resource. And we've obviously talked a lot today, and we tried to cover as much as possible on this case. Now, if you do have issues, like say, go to, you always talk to Tom, talk to me, but definitely do take the time to go and look at that resource. Let's hope, Tom, there's nothing else over the summer. I know you're going to take six weeks off.
I'm taking the summer holidays off. I'm packing the tent up. And I'm off into hopefully somewhere that doesn't have any 3G. But we wanted to, as you mentioned, speak to IBAS. We don't know at this point if this is going to be before the summer holidays start or just after the summer holidays end. So maybe it'll be next week and maybe it'll be in 7 weeks. But what I'd like from anyone listening is that I think IBAS would quite appreciate a little bit of feedback from our side of the fence. And what I would say is that if you've got any experience, especially with how long the process has been, if you've been engaged with IBAS, or if you thought that the outcome that you had was fair, or if you had considered any other arbitration service, or if you even wouldn't consider touching them, a little bit like I wouldn't consider touching them from the experience I've had in the past. Get in touch with us and let us know, because I'd like to collate all of that information and sort of mention that to IBAS of, this is how you have been perceived historically. Perhaps, I don't know, but perhaps there is an element of 10 years ago, they were so bad, because that's when I used them really last, that they might be a little bit better just now. And so a lot of this feedback perhaps could help me understand the general perception people have of IBAS these days. Again, we don't know if we're going to speak to them in a week's time or in 7 weeks' time, but it would be really good to bring this up with them to sort of move the conversation forward from our side of the fence.
Yeah, definitely. I'd second that. Yeah, get in touch with me or Tom. If Tom's away, you can talk to me as well. You can copy me, Pete, at smartbettingclub.com, as well as Tom. And it will build up a caseload, if you like, to put to him. We can get some good examples.
Cool. What have we got left, Pete?
Well, nothing really. We haven't got through this podcast without mentioning Cameron Smith once. So he paid out at 22-1 without an issue.
Get in, young Cam Smith. Do you see those photographs of him sitting in economy class on the aeroplane trying to get the open into the luggage compartment above his chair?
Such an Aussie, isn't he, with that mullet and the little moustache?
You know what that's called? It's called a Tennessee waterfall. Do you know that?
I did not know.
There you go.
I expect you to come back from holiday with a Tennessee waterfall, Tom.
I'm doing it. It might, with the current size of my hair, it might take quite a few holidays, but I'm up for that challenge. It's on, okay?
Okay, you're on. Okay, if you do it, I shall do it. I may have to check with my wife first. So, all right, Tom. Well, thank you. You have a great holiday. Thanks for talking about this today with me. And I know IBAS will be listening to this. We'll probably try and get the Gambling Commission, send them a link. Why not? And if you're one of these organizations or somebody involved in the industry and you've got thoughts on this podcast, and maybe we don't understand things, or maybe you're just a punter who's got an opinion to share, or IBAS, then do get in touch, because I think, like you, Tom, I've learned a lot in this last week, and I imagine there's a plenty more that we can certainly scope out about this particular topic and all the things we talked about today. So get in touch if that's you. But for now, Tom, we will reconvene either next week or in early September, talk about IBAS and enjoy your holiday. And then let's hope we get 7 more weeks of winners. That'd be quite nice on the PGA Tour. Let's not get too greedy.
Awesome. No.
All right, Tom.
All right. Thanks very much. Cheers, Pete.
Thank you. Bye.